Hello and welcome to another episode of Property Ponderings, the podcast where we dig deep into the world of property buying, selling and renovating, giving you property advice to ponder. My name's Craig Nicol, your host. I'm a licensed real estate agent in Melbourne, Australia, with over 15 years of property experience as an agency owner, property investor, renovator, town planner, salesperson, auctioneer and buyer's agent. I want you to make better property buying, selling and renovating decisions to build the future that you are chasing. In today's episode, it's all about how the size and type of properties in Australia compare to the rest of the world. By the end of this episode, you'll understand how Australian homes stack up in terms of size, layout and style compared to international standards, and what trends are emerging globally that might influence property here into the future. So let's dive in and get one step closer to your dream property. So firstly, how do Australian properties compare globally? Let's start with a bit of a fact. Australians love space. It's been part of our property DNA for decades, and the numbers back this up. Firstly, Australian homes are some of the largest in the world. Research from CommSec has shown that Australia has consistently ranked amongst the countries with the largest average house sizes globally. In 2022, the average new house size in Australia was about 230 square metres. To give you some perspective, that's nearly double the size of a typical house in the UK, which averages around 76 to 90 square metres. And it's larger than most homes in Europe and even North America, where the average US home size comes in at around 190 to 210 square metres. So why do we build so big? It's a combination of factors. Traditionally, there's been more land availability in Australia, especially in suburban and regional areas. We know that a lot of Australia is of lower density, and there are large spaces of vast land that is not being used at the moment as well, which is often included within urban growth boundaries that are set aside not for development but other activities. Another reason is a preference for detached homes with plenty of bedrooms and backyard space, and this has become quite prevalent since COVID as well during those days of lockdowns. Another factor is just the great Australian dream, as they say, of a big home that has been ingrained in our culture for many generations. But there's been a bit of a shift lately, which we will discuss a little bit more in a moment. What I want to discuss next is another key difference that lies in the types of properties Australians favour compared to the rest of the world. So, a few key points here. Detached houses dominate Australia's housing market, making up around 70% of all homes. That's according to the ABS. Compare this to countries like Japan, where space is so limited that apartments and smaller multi-storey homes are far more common. In Tokyo, for example, it's not unusual to find apartments of around 30 square metres or less. In the UK and Europe, you'll find a high percentage of townhouses and terrace housing as land supply is tight. Australian cities, by contrast, have grown outwards rather than upwards, which has shaped our preference for big houses with big backyards. That said, that is changing in cities like Sydney and Melbourne, where apartments and townhouses are on the rise due to population growth, affordability and lifestyle trends. So let's talk about urban density and suburban living. Density first. Australia's population density is around 3 people per square kilometre, which is incredibly low compared to countries like Japan, which is 347 people per square kilometre, or even the UK, which is 281 people per square kilometre. So just think about that for a moment. Australia's population density is only 3 people per square kilometre. So we are talking about a difference of over 100 times in Japan, and the UK basically over 100 times as well, just on the lower side of that. So the result, this means that Australians have historically had space to spread out into sprawling suburbs. But there are a few reasons why this is shifting. Australia's population is expected to double by 2070. And also, government's planning policies are now pushing for high density housing in urban areas to accommodate this growth, rather than continuing to spread out into our natural environments. So this means that apartment living, townhouses and small lots are becoming more common, especially in cities like Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, where housing affordability remains a major issue. For example, in Greater Sydney, apartments now make up about 30% of all dwellings. And this trend mirrors parts of Asia and Europe, where urban density has already become the norm for decades. However, if we compare it to, say, Beijing, which is approximately 63% apartments of all the housing, and in Japan it's actually 46%. So there's still a long way to go to get to these other cities where higher densities are much more prevalent, but still there is a trend in Australia. The next thing I'd like to speak about is the impact of climate and lifestyle. So Australia's climate and lifestyle have had a huge impact on the types of homes we build. Compared to other countries, there are a few key points to consider. So firstly, open plan living. Australians are known for their love of open plan spaces, outdoor areas and natural light. This reflects our lifestyle, which includes barbecues, outdoor dining and a focus on that indoor-outdoor living. In contrast, homes in Europe often prioritise insulation and smaller rooms to conserve heat during the colder months. In Scandinavian countries, sustainability is key, with homes designed to maximise energy efficiency in both summer and winter. Australia, though, is catching up in this area with a greater focus on energy efficient design and the use of solar panels. In 2022, the National Construction Code has introduced stricter energy efficiency standards, aligning us with global trends in sustainable housing. So, smaller homes are becoming more common. So this is an interesting trend. While Australia has homes that are quite big, they've started to shrink. Over the past decade, the average house size has fallen by around 5 to 10%. This is especially true in urban areas where smaller blocks of land and higher construction costs are pushing people towards more compact homes. CommSec noted that the size of new apartments in Australia has also shrunk to around 130 square metres, much smaller than what was typical in the early 2000s. In comparison, apartments in countries like Hong Kong or Japan can be as small as 20 or 30 square metres. Even in the US, which has historically had large homes, there's been a shift towards smaller, more efficient housing in response to rising costs and sustainability concerns. So what can we learn from other countries? Firstly, embracing smart design. Countries with limited space like Japan and parts of Europe have perfected the art of smart, space-efficient design. Think about multi-purpose furniture, clever storage and modular layouts. Secondly, sustainability is the future. Countries like Sweden and Denmark are leading the way with eco-friendly homes that maximise energy efficiency. Although Australia is moving in this direction, there's still plenty of room for improvement. And finally, smaller doesn't necessarily mean less livable. Smaller homes can still be functional, beautiful and comfortable. As housing affordability becomes a bigger issue in Australia, we may see more buyers prioritise design over size. So let's recap. Australia's homes are some of the largest in the world, but they are gradually getting smaller. We still love our detached houses, but apartments and townhouses are becoming more common in cities. Global trends like smart design, sustainability and urban density are beginning to shape the future of Australian housing. So whether you're building, buying or renovating, there's a lot we can learn from other countries and how they use space more efficiently and sustainably. And this is all great to keep in mind when you're renovating or building in the future or buying homes, because there may be a greater value to your property or your property investment when you do take these things into account and allow for more smart design, sustainability. You may find that your property appreciates in a better way by keeping in touch with the trends of what's going on, and that's why today's episode is important, as well as trying to provide some interesting facts. It's also very important to understand what sort of trends are occurring so that you're on top of it when you're investing or buying homes to ensure you're building a property future that you want, and that's what this podcast is all about. So look, that ends another episode of Property Ponderings. I hope that's given you some insights into how Australia stacks up against the rest of the world with property type and size, and this may impact a few of your next property decisions. If you want to discuss anything further from the podcast, or if you're looking for tailored buying or renovating advice, please feel free to reach out to me at 0400 122 081. Chat again soon. provided in this podcast is for general information purposes only and does not constitute financial, legal, or investment advice. While every effort is made to ensure the information shared is accurate and up to date, it may not apply to your specific circumstances. Listeners are advised to seek independent professional advice tailored to their personal situation before making any property, financial, or investment decisions. Nickel Bioadvisory and Craig Nickel disclaim all liability for any decisions made based on the information discussed in this podcast. Property markets are dynamic and outcomes can vary depending on factors such as location, timing, and economic conditions. Always conduct thorough research and consult with trusted professionals before taking action. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge and accept this disclaimer.